The dust-laden wind carried a scent of impending rain, as Olivia Blackwell clutched the tattered letter in her trembling hands, her heart sinking with each word that confirmed her father's death and the substantial debt he had left behind. Standing outside her small millinery shop in Wheatland, Wyoming Territory, 1878, she watched as three men on horseback approached, their silhouettes dark against the setting sun, the same men who had been pressuring her to sell her father's land for weeks. Bethany Brooks had inherited her father's shop 6 months ago after his passing, along with the adjoining property that stretched toward the hills, land that contained something valuable enough that these men had transitioned from making offers to making threats. At 22, she had managed to keep the business afloat, crafting hats for the ladies of Wheatland and surrounding areas, but these men wanted more than she was willing to give. "Miss Brooks," called the leader, Vernon Hodge, as he dismounted, his boots landing heavily in the dirt. "Have you reconsidered our generous offer?" Bethany straightened her spine, though her voice betrayed her fear. "Mr. Hodge, as I've told you before, I have no intention of selling my father's land." Hodge exchanged glances with his companions, a tall man with a scar across his chin named Mick, and a younger, fidgety fellow they called Roper. "That's unfortunate, Miss Brooks. A woman alone in these parts. Things happen. Accidents, fires." He gestured vaguely toward her shop. "Would be a shame if something were to befall your little business here." Bethany's throat tightened as she recognized the threat for what it was. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Hodge?" "Just stating facts, madam," Hodge replied, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. "Think on it. We'll be back tomorrow for your answer." As they turned to leave, a figure on horseback approached from the opposite direction, a tall man with broad shoulders and a worn leather duster. He dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle. Owen Wallace had been passing through Wheatland, planning to stop only long enough to resupply before continuing to Montana, but the scene before him caused him to pause. "Everything all right here, madam?" His voice was deep and steady, his blue eyes taking in the situation with a practiced calm that spoke of experience with conflict. Before Bethany could answer, Hodge stepped forward. "This doesn't concern you, stranger. Just a business matter between the lady and us." Owen's gaze shifted from Hodge to Bethany, noting her distress. "Seems the lady isn't too pleased with your business methods. Like I said, not your concern." Hodge's hand hovered near his holster. Owen didn't move, but something in his stance changed subtly. "I've always found that when a man has to resort to intimidation to do business, he's probably not offering a fair deal." Tension crackled in the air as Hodge considered his options. Owen Wallace had the weathered look of a man who'd seen his share of trouble and knew how to handle it. After a moment, Hodge backed down. "We'll be back tomorrow, Miss Brooks," he said, mounting his horse. "Think carefully about your future." With that, the three men rode away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Owen turned to Bethany, whose composure finally crumbled as tears welled in her eyes. Without a word, he pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, embarrassed by her display of weakness. "I'm not usually this easily rattled." "Nothing to thank me for," Owen replied, pocketing the handkerchief. "Those men were out of line. They want my father's land," Bethany explained, gesturing toward the hills. "They've been pressuring me to sell since he passed. I'm afraid they won't take no for an answer much longer." Owen studied her for a moment. "Do you have someone who can stay with you tonight?" Bethany shook her head. "I've been on my own since my father died. Most folks in town are friendly enough, but they're not keen on crossing Hodge and his men," Owen finished for her. He glanced at the darkening sky. "I was planning to move on, but I think I'll stay in town tonight. Which way to the hotel?" down the street on the right. Mrs. Patterson runs it, Bethany replied, suddenly feeling safer knowing this stranger would be nearby. I'm Bethany Brooks, by the way. Owen Wallace, he replied with a slight nod. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Brooks, though I wish it were under better circumstances. As Bethany watched him lead his horse toward the hotel, she couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. She didn't know anything about this man who had stepped in to help her, but something about his steady presence gave her hope that perhaps she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. The following morning, Bethany opened her shop earlier than usual, her sleep having been fitful and plagued by worries. She had barely arranged her newest creations in the window when the bell above the door jingled, announcing a customer. To her surprise, it was Owen Wallace. "Mr. Wallace," she greeted him, smoothing her apron nervously. "I didn't expect to see you so early." "Call me Owen," he said, looking somewhat out of place among the feminine trappings of her millinery shop. "I thought I'd check on you before heading out." Bethany's heart sank at the thought of him leaving. "You're still planning to go, then?" "That depends," Owen replied, studying her with those keen blue eyes. "Those men who were bothering you yesterday, tell me about them." Bethany sighed, setting aside the hat she'd been working on. "Vernon Hodge and his associates have been trying to buy my father's land for months. At first they were polite enough, but lately—" She shook her head. "I don't know why they want it so badly. It's just scrubland, really, though my father always said it had potential." "Men like that don't pursue worthless land," Owen observed. "Have you been out there recently?" "Not since Pa died," Bethany admitted. "I've been too busy keeping the shop running." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to take a look if you don't mind. Might give us some idea of what they're after." "Us?" Bethany asked, hope creeping into her voice. "I've got nowhere pressing to be," Owen said with a shrug that didn't quite mask his concern for her situation. "And I don't take kindly to men who threaten women." The bell jingled again, and they both turned to see Sheriff Tate enter the shop. A man in his 50s with graying hair and a perpetually tired expression, he nodded to them both. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Wallace," he greeted them. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned we had a new visitor in town, said you had some trouble with Hodge and his boys yesterday." "They threatened Miss Brooks," Owen stated plainly. "Made it clear they wouldn't take no for an answer about her land." Sheriff Tate sighed. "Vernon Hodge has influential friends in the territory. I can have a word with him about his manners, but beyond that—" He spread his hands helplessly. "So you'll do nothing?" Owen asked, his tone mild but his eyes hard. "I didn't say that," the sheriff replied defensively. "But there's law and there's reality. Hodge hasn't actually done anything yet." "He threatened to burn down my shop," Bethany interjected. "Did he say those exact words?" When Bethany hesitated, Sheriff Tate nodded. "That's what I thought. Implied threats are hard to pin on a man. I'll talk to him, but you might want to consider his offer, Miss Brooks. Men like Hodge usually get what they want, one way or another." After the sheriff left, silence hung in the air until Owen broke it. "Seems the law around here has its limitations." "Sheriff Tate isn't a bad man," Bethany defended. "But he's right about Hodge having powerful friends. He's connected to some railroad interests, I think." Owen considered this. "When do you close up shop?" "Usually around 4, Bethany replied. "I'll be back then. We'll ride out to your father's land, see what all the fuss is about." His tone suggested it wasn't a request but a statement of fact. Throughout the day, Bethany found her thoughts returning to Owen Wallace. There was something reassuring about him, a quiet confidence that made her feel protected. She had managed on her own since her father's death, determined to prove to the town that she could succeed where many thought she would fail. But she couldn't deny the comfort in knowing someone was willing to stand beside her, true to his word. Owen returned just as she was closing up. He had acquired a second horse, a gentle mare that would be easier for Bethany to ride than his own sturdy gelding. "I hope you don't mind riding astride," he said as they mounted up. "It's a fair distance to your land, from what you've said." Bethany gathered her skirts and settled onto the saddle, grateful she'd worn a simpler dress today. "My father taught me to ride when I was little. Said a proper lady should know how to sit side saddle in town, but out on the land, practicality trumps propriety." Owen's mouth quirked in a brief smile. "Your father sounds like he was a sensible man." "He was," Bethany said softly, memories of her father flooding back as they rode toward the outskirts of town. "He came out west with nothing but dreams and determination. Built our home with his own hands, started several businesses. The millinery shop was his last venture, bought it for me when I showed interest in designing hats." "And the land?" Owen asked as they rode past the last buildings of Wheatland and into the open country. "That was his first purchase," Bethany explained. "He always said it would be worth something someday, but he never explained why. It was about an hour's ride from town, too far for me to keep up with once I took over the shop." They rode in comfortable silence, the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats punctuated only by Bethany's occasional directions. The land around them was typical Wyoming Territory, rolling hills covered in scrub grass, occasional stands of cottonwoods marking the presence of water, and the distant mountains providing a majestic backdrop. As they approached Bethany's property, Owen's keen eyes scanned the surroundings, noting details most would miss. "Riders have been through here recently," he observed, pointing to tracks in the dirt. "More than once from the look of it." Bethany frowned. "Hodge's men, you think?" "Likely," Owen agreed. "They're interested in something specific. Let's find out what." They followed the tracks, which led toward a small valley nestled between two hills. As they crested the ridge, Bethany gasped. Below them, a camp had been set up near what appeared to be a freshly dug mine entrance. "That wasn't there before," she whispered. "Pa never mentioned any mining operations." Owen's expression hardened as he observed the scene. 3 men worked at the entrance, loading what looked like ore samples into sacks. None of them were Hodge or his companions from town, but it was clear they were working for someone. "Looks like they've found something valuable on your land, Miss Brooks," Owen said quietly. "Gold, silver, or copper most likely." "They're stealing from me," Bethany realized, anger replacing her initial shock. "That they are," Owen agreed, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. "And now we know why Hodge is so determined to get you to sell." Before they could retreat unnoticed, one of the men below looked up and spotted them. Shouts rang out as the workers scrambled for weapons. "Time to go," Owen said tersely, wheeling his horse around. "We've seen what we needed to." They rode hard back toward town, pushing their horses to a gallop once they were sure they weren't being pursued. By the time they reached the outskirts of Wheatland, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "They'll tell Hodge they saw us," Bethany said, catching her breath as they slowed their mounts to a walk. "He'll know we know." Owen nodded grimly. "Which means he'll be more desperate than ever to force your hand. You shouldn't stay alone tonight." "I can't leave the shop," Bethany protested. "Everything I have is there." "Then I'll stay with you," Owen stated simply. Bethany looked at him in surprise. "That wouldn't be proper. People would talk." "Better talked about than dead," Owen replied bluntly. "I can sleep in the storeroom or wherever is convenient. But I'm not leaving you unprotected, not now that we know what's at stake." Back at the shop, Bethany prepared a simple meal while Owen stabled their horses. The small living quarters behind her millinery business were modest but comfortable, reflecting the practical nature of their owner. As they ate, Bethany couldn't help but study the man across from her, Owen Wallace was not what she would call handsome in the conventional sense. His features were too weathered, his expression too guarded for that. But there was something compelling about him, an underlying strength that had nothing to do with his physical capabilities and everything to do with his character. "You're not just passing through, are you?" Bethany asked suddenly. "At least, you weren't originally just passing through." Owen paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "What makes you say that?" "The way you handle yourself," Bethany explained. "You're too comfortable with confrontation to be an ordinary traveler." Setting down his fork, Owen regarded her thoughtfully. "You're observant, Miss Brooks." "Bethany," she corrected him, "if you're going to risk your life for me, I think we can dispense with formalities." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Bethany, then." He hesitated before continuing. "I was a lawman once, U.S. Marshal in Colorado Territory. And now I'm just a man trying to find somewhere quiet to settle," Owen admitted. "I've seen enough trouble to last several lifetimes." "Yet here you are, stepping right into the middle of my troubles," Bethany observed. Owen's eyes met hers. "Some things a man can't walk away from, no matter how much he might want to." The intensity of his gaze made Bethany's heart beat faster, and she looked away first. "Well, I'm grateful, whatever your reasons." After dinner, they discussed their options. Bethany was adamant about not selling her land, especially now that she knew its true value. Owen suggested they gather evidence of the illegal mining operation and present it to the territorial authorities, bypassing Sheriff Tate entirely. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Men like Hodge don't give up easily, and if he has railroad connections, he'll have powerful allies." "It's not just about the value," Bethany explained, her voice soft with emotion. "That land was my father's dream. He believed in its potential when no one else did. I can't just hand it over to men who threatened me, who would have stolen from me without a second thought." Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then we fight." Morning brought a clear sky and renewed determination. Bethany opened her shop as usual, though Owen insisted on staying nearby. He positioned himself across the street at the general store, keeping an eye on Bethany's shop while appearing to be occupied with resupplying for his journey. It wasn't long before Hodge and his men appeared, entering the millinery shop with the confidence of men accustomed to getting their way. Owen watched through the general store window, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. Inside the shop, Bethany stood her ground as Hodge approached the counter. "Miss Brooks, I trust you've had time to reconsider our offer." "I have," Bethany replied calmly. "And my answer remains the same. I won't be selling my father's land." Hodge's expression hardened. "I don't think you understand your position. We're offering you good money for worthless scrubland. Most would consider that more than fair." "If it's so worthless, Mr. Hodge, why are you so eager to have it?" Bethany countered. "Perhaps it has something to do with the mine your men have illegally dug on my property." The surprise on Hodge's face was quickly replaced by anger. "You've been trespassing on my own land." Bethany's laugh was without humor. "I think the trespassers are your men, Mr. Hodge, along with their mining equipment." Mick stepped forward menacingly. "You should watch your tone, Miss Brooks. And you should watch yours," came Owen's voice from the doorway. He entered the shop, his presence filling the small space with an undeniable authority. "Miss Brooks isn't alone in this anymore." Hodge turned to face Owen, recognition dawning on his face. "Wallace, Owen Wallace. I heard you'd left the Marshals." "News travels fast," Owen commented, his expression unchanged. "Not fast enough for some," Hodge replied. "Word is you quit after that business in Silverton. Too many bodies for your conscience." A muscle in Owen's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. "This isn't about me, Hodge. It's about your illegal mining operation on Miss Brooks' land. I'm guessing the railroad you work for doesn't know you're running a private venture on the side." Uncertainty flickered across Hodge's face, confirming Owen's suspicion. "You're bluffing. You've got no proof." "Don't I?" Owen reached into his coat and produced a small sack. He emptied its contents onto the counter ore samples they had collected during a second, early morning visit to the mine. Silver, from the looks of it. Rich veins, too. Enough to make a man forget his employer's interests in favor of his own. Hodge's face paled slightly. "What do you want?" "For you and your men to clear out," Owen stated flatly. "Stop the mining, leave Miss Brooks alone, and get out of Wheatland." A tense silence filled the shop as Hodge considered his options. Finally, he smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Or what? You'll go to the sheriff. Tate's in my pocket. The railroad. They might be interested in Miss Brooks' land themselves once they know what's on it." "I was thinking more along the lines of this," Owen said, producing a folded document from his inside pocket. "A telegram from a former colleague in the U.S. Marshal's office. Seems they're very interested in reports of claim jumping and illegal mining in the territories. A federal investigation would be thorough." The threat hung in the air, its implications clear. A federal investigation would expose not just the illegal mining but any other shady dealings Hodge might be involved in. "You're making a mistake, Wallace," Hodge growled, but the bluster had gone out of him. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Owen replied evenly. "Unless you want to find out how it feels to spend years in a territorial prison. I hear they're not particularly comfortable." With a final glare, Hodge motioned to his men, and they left the shop. Through the window, Bethany and Owen watched as they mounted their horses and rode out of town. "Will they really leave?" Bethany asked, her voice steady despite the confrontation. Owen's expression was grim. "For now. Hodge isn't the type to give up easily, but he's smart enough to recognize when he's outmaneuvered. The telegram is real. I sent it yesterday after we discovered the mine." Relief washed over Bethany, and she impulsively reached out to grasp Owen's hand. "Thank you. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Owen looked down at their joined hands, something softening in his eyes. "No need for that. I was happy to help." But both knew the danger wasn't entirely past. Hodge had retreated, not surrendered, and the valuable silver on Bethany's land would continue to attract attention, some of it unwelcome. Over the next few days, Owen remained in Wheatland, helping Bethany secure her property. They rode out together to the mine, where Owen showed her how to file a proper mineral claim with the territorial authorities, protecting her rights to the silver that had been discovered. They also hired 2 reliable men from town to guard the site against further trespassing. During this time, something shifted between them. The shared danger, the mutual respect, and the quiet moments of conversation began to forge a connection neither had anticipated. Bethany found herself looking forward to Owen's company. His dry humor and straightforward manner a refreshing change from the polite distance most men in town maintained with her. For Owen, Bethany represented something he had thought lost to him, a chance at a normal life, away from the violence and moral compromises of his past. Her courage and determination in facing down Hodge had impressed him, revealing a strength of character that matched her outward beauty. A week after the confrontation with Hodge, they sat on the small porch behind Bethany's shop, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The spring evening was cool but pleasant, with the scent of blooming wildflowers carried on the gentle breeze. The U.S. Marshal should arrive within the week, Owen mentioned, sipping the coffee Bethany had prepared. "Once the official investigation begins, Hodge will have more to worry about than your land." Bethany nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "What will you do after that? Continue on to Montana?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not sure anymore," he admitted. "My plans have shifted." "Because of the silver mine?" Bethany asked, though she suspected there was more to it. Owen turned to face her, the fading light casting shadows across his features. "Because of you," he said simply. "I came to Wheatland looking for a place to pass through. I didn't expect to find a reason to stay." Bethany's heart raced at his words. "And have you found a reason to stay?" Instead of answering directly, Owen reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, his hand gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with a tenderness that belied his rugged exterior. "I think I have," he murmured, leaning in until their foreheads almost touched. "If that reason would want me to." "She would," Bethany whispered, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question being asked and answered in the most fundamental of ways. When they finally parted, Bethany's eyes shimmered with emotion, and Owen found himself once again reaching up to gently wipe away the tears that threatened to spill. "Happy tears," she assured him with a smile that lit up her entire face. Owen returned her smile, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Then I don't mind them at all." But their newfound happiness was soon tested. 2 days later, as Owen was helping a customer in the general store, having taken up temporary employment there to explain his continued presence in town, a commotion outside drew his attention. He stepped onto the boardwalk to see Roper, the youngest of Hodge's men, riding hard down the main street. "Fire!" Roper shouted as he passed. "Fire at the Brooks place." Owen's blood ran cold. Bethany had ridden out to her father's land that morning to check on the mining claim and wasn't expected back until afternoon. Without hesitation, he ran to the livery, saddled his horse, and galloped out of town, fear driving him faster than prudence would advise. As he approached the Brooks property, he could see smoke rising from the small cabin that stood near the mine entrance. Spurring his horse forward, he arrived to find the cabin fully engulfed in flames and Bethany nowhere in sight. The 2 men they had hired to guard the claim were tied to a tree nearby, beaten but alive. Owen quickly freed them. "What happened? Where's Miss Brooks?" "Hodge and his men," one of the guards coughed, his face bloodied. "They came about an hour ago. Set the cabin alight as a distraction, then grabbed Miss Brooks when she tried to help us." "Which way did they go?" Owen demanded, already checking his revolver. "North, toward the ridge," the other guard replied. "Hodge said something about making her sign over the claim before they left the territory." Owen's expression hardened. "Get back to town, tell Sheriff Tate what's happened. Then find the telegraph operator and send a message to Marshal Reynolds in Cheyenne. Tell him Hodge has kidnapped Miss Brooks." Without waiting for acknowledgement, Owen mounted up and headed north, following the fresh tracks. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Hodge was desperate, cornered, and that made him dangerous. But Owen had faced desperate men before, and he had something now that gave him an edge, someone worth fighting for. The tracks led into rougher country, the hills becoming steeper and the vegetation sparser. Owen followed carefully, mindful of the possibility of an ambush. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, he spotted smoke from a campfire in a sheltered hollow ahead. Dismounting, Owen approached on foot, using the rocks and scrub brush for cover. As he drew closer, he could make out 4 figures: Hodge, Mick, another man he didn't recognize, and Bethany, who sat with her hands bound, her expression defiant despite the dire situation. "Just sign the paper, Miss Brooks," Hodge was saying, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Sign it and you can go back to your little hat shop and forget all about this. Fight me and well." He left the threat hanging. "I told you I won't sign," Bethany replied firmly. This land was my father's legacy. I won't hand it over to thieves and bullies." Mick stepped forward menacingly. "Maybe we need to be more persuasive, Vernon." Owen had seen enough. Moving silently around the perimeter of the camp, he positioned himself behind a large boulder that would provide cover. Then, with practiced precision, he fired a shot that kicked up dirt at Mick's feet, causing the man to jump back in alarm. "Next one won't miss," Owen called out, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "All of you drop your weapons and step away from Miss Brooks. Wallace." Hodge snarled, drawing his own pistol. "Should have known you'd follow." "Last warning, Hodge," Owen replied calmly. "Drop the gun or I drop you." Instead of complying, Hodge grabbed Bethany, using her as a shield as he backed toward the horses. "You won't risk hitting her, Wallace. I know you're type too noble for your own good." Owen remained silent, watching, waiting. Bethany's eyes met his across the distance, and in that moment of connection, an understanding passed between them. With sudden movement, Bethany drove her elbow hard into Hodge's stomach, causing him to double over in pain. As his grip loosened, she twisted away, dropping to the ground. The moment she was clear, Owen fired. His shot caught Hodge in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his own gun flying. Mick and the other man raised their weapons, but Owen was already moving, firing again and hitting Mick in the leg. The third man wisely dropped his gun, raising his hands in surrender. "It's over, Hodge," Owen said, approaching cautiously, his revolver still trained on the wounded man. "The U.S. Marshal is on his way. Kidnapping carries a heavy sentence in the territories." Hodge clutched his bleeding shoulder, hatred burning in his eyes. "You've ruined everything, Wallace." "Everything? You did that yourself," Owen replied, quickly binding Hodge's hands behind his back with a length of rope from the camp. He secured Mick and the other man in similar fashion, before finally turning his attention to Bethany. She stood trembling slightly, the brave facade beginning to crack now that the immediate danger had passed. Owen holstered his gun and went to her, gently untying the ropes around her wrists. Once freed, Bethany fell against his chest, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling over. Owen's arms encircled her, one hand stroking her hair as he murmured reassurances. "It's all right. You're safe now. I've got you." After a moment, he pulled back just enough to see her face, his thumb gently wiping away the tears that tracked down her cheeks. "Are you hurt?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Bethany shook her head. "Just scared. I didn't know if anyone would find me." "I will always find you," Owen promised, the intensity of his words revealing deeper feelings than he had yet expressed. "Always." 2 days later, U.S. Marshal James Reynolds arrived in Wheatland to take custody of Hodge and his men. The charges were serious kidnapping, assault, illegal mining, and attempted murder, enough to ensure they would spend many years in prison. As they watched the prisoners being loaded onto a wagon for transport to Cheyenne, Sheriff Tate approached Owen and Bethany, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Wallace," he began awkwardly, "I want to apologize for not taking your concerns about Hodge more seriously. I let his connections intimidate me into looking the other way." Owen nodded acknowledgement of the apology while Bethany offered a small smile. "We all make mistakes, Sheriff. What matters is learning from them." With Hodge and his men gone, life in Wheatland began to return to normal. Bethany reopened her shop, though with the prospect of income from the silver mine, she hired an assistant to help manage the business. This gave her more time to focus on designing hats, which had always been her true passion, and to spend time with Owen. For his part, Owen found himself settling into life in Wheatland with surprising ease. The general store owner, impressed by Owen's work ethic during his temporary employment, offered him a permanent position, which Owen accepted. It wasn't as exciting as his previous life as a U.S. Marshal, but after years of violence and difficult decisions, the quiet routine was welcome. More welcome still was the developing relationship with Bethany. They spent evenings together, sometimes simply talking on her porch, other times taking walks along the outskirts of town. Owen shared stories from his past, the good and the bad, and found in Bethany an understanding listener who neither judged his mistakes nor glorified his successes. Bethany, in turn, confided her dreams for the future, her memories of her father, and her fears about managing the newfound wealth the silver mine represented. Owen's practical advice and unwavering support helped ease those fears, allowing her to envision possibilities she had never considered before. As summer bloomed across the Wyoming Territory, bringing warm days and mild evenings, Owen and Bethany's courtship became the talk of Wheatland. Some gossiped about the impropriety of their relationship, a single woman spending so much time with a man without formal chaperonage, but most of the townspeople, having witnessed Owen's courage in saving Bethany from Hodge, viewed the pair with approval. On a particularly beautiful evening in late July, Owen took Bethany for a ride to her father's land. The silver mine was now operating legally, with proper equipment and experienced miners working under contract. A portion of the profits was set aside for improvements to Wheatland itself. A new schoolhouse, better roads, and a small hospital were all in the planning stages. They rode past the mine to a small hill overlooking the property. Owen had prepared a picnic, which they enjoyed as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As they sat side by side, watching the spectacular sunset, Owen reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, velvet-covered box. He had ridden all the way to Cheyenne to find it, wanting something special for the occasion. "Bethany," he began, his voice unusually hesitant, "these past few months have been the happiest of my life. Before I came to Wheatland, I was just drifting, trying to outrun memories I couldn't escape. Then I met you, and for the first time in years, I found myself thinking about the future instead of the past." Bethany's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. "Owen." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "I'm not a wealthy man, and I can't promise you an easy life, but I can promise to stand beside you, to protect you, and to love you for as long as I live. Bethany Brooks, will you marry me?" Tears of joy filled Bethany's eyes as she nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. Owen gently took her hand and slipped the ring onto her finger, then leaned forward to kiss her, a kiss filled with promise and the certainty of a shared future. "Yes," Bethany finally managed when they parted. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen Wallace." The wedding took place in September, with the entire town of Wheatland in attendance. Bethany wore a gown of ivory silk that she had designed herself, with a matching hat adorned with small silk flowers and a delicate veil. Owen, uncomfortable in formal attire but willing to endure it for Bethany's sake, wore a new black suit with a silver brocade waistcoat, a nod to the silver that had, indirectly, brought them together. The ceremony was held in the small church near the center of town, with wildflowers decorating the simple wooden pews. Bethany had no family to give her away, so Sheriff Tate, eager to make amends for his earlier inaction, stepped in to fulfill that role. Marshal Reynolds, who had become a friend to both Owen and Bethany during the investigation into Hodge's crimes, stood as Owen's best man. As they exchanged vows, Owen and Bethany were aware of how unlikely their union had once seemed. A former lawman with a troubled past and a determined young businesswoman brought together by threat and danger, but united by something much stronger: mutual respect, shared values, and a deep, abiding love. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice the population of Wheatland. The newlyweds slipped away as the festivities continued, riding to their new home, a comfortable house they had built halfway between the town and Bethany's silver mine, symbolizing the balance they had found between her business interests and their desire for privacy. Their first year of marriage brought changes both expected and surprising. Bethany's millinery shop thrived under the management of her assistant, allowing Bethany to focus on designing hats for special orders and managing the increasingly profitable silver mine. Owen, finding that working at the general store didn't provide enough challenge, accepted an offer to become deputy sheriff of Wheatland when Sheriff Tate decided he needed assistance. The position suited Owen perfectly, allowing him to use his experience as a lawman while avoiding the moral ambiguities that had troubled him during his time as a U.S. Marshal. Wheatland was generally peaceful, with most of his duties involving settling minor disputes and occasionally escorting rowdy cowboys out of the saloon on Saturday nights. In the spring of 1880, as the first anniversary of their meeting approached, Bethany shared news that would change their lives once again. She was expecting their first child. Owen's reaction was one of pure joy, tempered only by concern for Bethany's health and well-being. He had lost his own mother in childbirth, a fact he had shared with Bethany during their courtship, and the memory made him particularly attentive during her pregnancy. Bethany, however, bloomed in her expectant state. Her natural vitality seemed enhanced, and she approached impending motherhood with the same determination she had shown in running her business and defending her land. She arranged for her assistant to take over the millinery shop entirely, focusing instead on preparing their home for the baby and continuing to oversee the mining operation, though she limited her visits to the site as her pregnancy advanced. Their son, William Thomas Wallace, was born on a cold December morning in 1880, with snow falling gently outside the window of their bedroom. The birth was difficult but uncomplicated, and when the midwife placed the squalling infant in Owen's arms, he felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to his eyes. "He has your chin," Bethany observed tiredly from the bed, her face glowing with exhaustion and happiness. "And your spirit, I think," Owen replied, carefully returning their son to her arms. He certainly made his arrival known. As William, or Will, as they came to call him, grew, it became apparent that he had indeed inherited his mother's determination and his father's steady nature. By his first birthday, he was already showing signs of the man he would become: curious, thoughtful, and occasionally stubborn. Life settled into a pattern that, while not without challenges, brought contentment to both Owen and Bethany. The silver mine continued to produce, though by 1882 the richest veins had been exhausted. Still, it provided enough income to ensure the family's comfort and to fund improvements to Wheatland, which was growing steadily as the railroad finally reached the town. In the spring of 1883, their family expanded once more with the arrival of a daughter, Elizabeth Rose, named for both Bethany's and Owen's mothers. Beth, as she was called, was a quieter child than her brother, with thoughtful eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Will, now almost 3, appointed himself her protector, a role he took very seriously despite his young age. One evening, as Owen returned home from his duties as deputy, he found Bethany sitting on the porch, watching Will and Beth play in the yard. The setting sun bathed the scene in golden light, creating a picture of domestic tranquility that still had the power to stop Owen in his tracks, even after 5 years of marriage. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining Bethany on the porch swing after kissing her in greeting. Bethany leaned against his shoulder, a contented smile playing around her lips. "I was just thinking about the day we met, how frightened I was of Hodge and his men, and how you stepped in to help a stranger." "Best decision I ever made," Owen replied, his arm circling her waist. "Though I don't think I realized it at the time." "Nor did I," Bethany admitted with a small laugh. "I was too worried about propriety and what the town would think of a strange man staying in my shop. And now look at us." Owen gestured toward their children, who had spotted him and were running toward the porch, their small faces alight with excitement. "All because Hodge couldn't take no for an answer." "All because you were brave enough to confront him," Bethany corrected, turning to face him fully. "All because you wiped away my tears and made me feel safe when I was most afraid." Owen's expression softened at the memory. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat." "I know," Bethany replied, standing as we'll reach the porch, his little sister struggling to keep up on shorter legs. "That's why I love you, Owen Wallace. That's why I'll always love you." As the children launched themselves into Owen's arms, filling the evening air with laughter and stories of their day, he looked over their heads at Bethany, the woman who had given him a home, a family, and a purpose. In her eyes, he saw the same love and commitment that had sustained them through danger and uncertainty, the same strength that had impressed him from the beginning, and the same tenderness that made each day a blessing. The Wild West had tested them, tried to break them, but together they had not just survived, they had thrived. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening Wyoming sky, Owen Wallace knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else, side by side, hand in hand, with courage and with love. Years passed, and Wheatland grew from a small settlement into a proper town. The Wallace family remained a central part of the community, with Owen eventually becoming sheriff after Tate retired in 1888. Bethany's business acumen led to investments in various enterprises throughout the region, and by the turn of the century, the Wallace name was known throughout Wyoming Territory for integrity and fair dealing. Will followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a lawman himself, while Beth revealed a talent for medicine and, defying convention, attended medical school in Denver before returning to establish Wheatland's first proper doctor's office. In 1890, Owen and Bethany welcomed a surprise addition to their family, a second son, James, who grew up to manage the family's business interests with his mother's sharp mind for commerce. Through it all, the boom years and the lean ones, the joys of watching their children grow, and the sorrows that inevitably touched their lives, Owen and Bethany remained devoted to each other. Their love story, which had begun with confrontation and tears, became a cornerstone of Wheatland folklore, a testament to courage, persistence, and the transformative power of love in even the wildest of frontiers. And on quiet evenings, when the responsibilities of the day were done, they could still be found sitting together on their porch, hand in hand, watching the Wyoming sunset and remembering the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together and changed their lives forever.